60 Minutes Rewind.
The secretary and the senator, we hate to disappoint you, is not another sex in high places scandal, but it is about power. The secretary in question is the Secretary of Transportation, Elizabeth Hanford Dole. The senator is her husband, Robert Dole of Kansas. 4 years from now, there could be a Dole in the White House, or maybe two Doles. The question is, which one would be president? Bob Dole once defended the Nixon administration in Watergate. Now the Doles live in it, in a small apartment. They leave for work by 8 in the morning, and it's plain who is senior in Washington protocol. She is picked up by a government Lincoln and chauffeur. He gets to work as best he can. The Doles rarely meet during a working day. This day, however, they do have a date. No, it's not for lunch. She has a date to testify before the Senate Finance Committee, Robert Dole, chairman.
Madam Secretary, we're prepared to have your statement. It can be stated in full or summarized. Your entire statement will be made a part of the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to come before this impartial body this afternoon. I hope we can come to quick agreement on these important matters that are before us in all three houses. I appreciate the opportunity sincerely.
Elizabeth Hanford Dole went from assistant to President Reagan to Secretary of Transportation, and now oversees a $28 billion budget and 102,000 employees. And because the Coast Guard comes under her office, she's the first woman to head a branch of the armed services. Not what might have been expected from this little North Carolina magnolia bud, or this magnolia blossom. But Elizabeth Hanford was a brain at a time and place when young women were not expected to be brainy. But at Duke University, she graduated Phi Beta Kappa in 1958 and went on to Harvard, got a master's degree, and did some modeling. She graduated from Harvard Law School and then to Washington, where she was in government in 5 administrations, and in 1975 married Senator Dole, his second marriage, her first. Elizabeth Dole was doing what a lot of other women in the country were doing, quietly knocking down barriers instead of taking to the barricades, and now has become a highly visible symbol. It was never easy. She remembers the words of a classmate at Harvard.
This was the first day of class, and he said, Elizabeth, he said, what are you doing here? Don't you realize there are men who would give their right arm to be in this law school, men who would use their legal education? I'll never forget it. It's as if it's seared in my brain, you know.
Who was it who said that?
Oh, no, I can't say. He's in Washington, though. And come to think of it, Morley, there may be some who thought that when I was appointed Secretary of Transportation. You know, we haven't completely gotten rid of that attitude in our society.
Now, the president opposes ERA. Are you still for ERA?
I'm for ERA. I think there's more than one way to reach equal rights for women, though, through the amendment or by moving now to change vestiges of discrimination in our laws and regulations. So I think if you truly care about equal rights for women, you're going to want to take action now, whether or not you support the amendment.
So you're able to live with a president who is not for the Equal Rights Amendment, even though you are for it?
That's right.
You know, I think we're all changing, but we've got a long way to go. I'm talking about men. I have a long way to go before we are willing to throw down all the barriers.
The barriers in Bob Dole's life were more of the times than of tradition. He grew up in Russell, Kansas in the Depression. He showed great promise at the University of Kansas, but he left to join the Army in 1943, served with distinction in Italy, and then with only 23 days left in the war in Europe, he was hit by a burst of machine gun fire. His shoulder was blown apart, his neck fractured, he lay paralyzed.
It seemed to me that the world was suddenly all unfolding and coming to an end. In fact, I have some very vivid memories of April 14, 1945, when as it happened, when I was hit, my arms were over my head, and I thought they must be gone. I couldn't move them, and I have a lot of memories. I don't think much about that anymore.
He was so badly wounded, doctors held little hope for his survival. Then they thought he may never walk again. He lost 70 pounds, a kidney, and the use of his right arm. He spent almost 3.5 years recovering in Army hospitals.
you ever wonder about that slim difference between Bob Dole, senator, and Bob Dole could still be lying in a veterans hospital somewhere?
You know, you sort of wonder about that as you look back on what made you do take the next step, whether it was first walking after a year, learning to dress myself after maybe 3 or 4 years. So yes, I think you had a choice, but I really believe that I think it teaches a lot of patience, and you become, I think, a little more sensitive to the needs of other people. I mean, if you think you've got a problem, you just look around you. You'll find on the way home tonight there was a blind man crossing the street. So when everybody out there is struggling in a different way. Some of it you can't see. It may be inside, it may be emotional.
Beyond his own spirit, it was his hometown and the free services of a surgeon that got Bob Dole through his own struggle. Back in 1976, when he was campaigning for vice president with President Ford in Russell, Kansas, he remembered all of that, and the memory was too much.
And I can recall the time when I needed help, the people of Russell helped. And I think...
In '76, he might have been a sensitive war hero to Russell, Kansas, but to a good part of the country, he was seen as a Republican hatchet man. People said, if you like Dick Nixon, you'll love Bob Dole. The high or low point of that image came in the '76 vice presidential debate with Walter Mondale.
I figured up the other day, if we added up the killed and wounded in Democrat wars in this century, it'd be about 1.6 million Americans, enough to fill the city of Detroit.
I think Senator Dole has richly earned his reputation as a hatchet man tonight by implying and stating that World War II and the Korean War were democratic wars.
I'm not certain about a hatchet man. I've never understood what a hatchet man was supposed to do. I did the best I could.
Somebody who takes an axe and chops away his opponents.
Oh, well, had I known the definition, I probably could have done better. But I was a partisan. I was a Republican chairman. You have to be partisan. They're going to get another person. I don't think I've ever been nasty or mean. I think I've been tried to use a little humor with it, so it at least sounds a little better.
Smile when you say that.
Smile when you say that, I think.
Dole has mellowed some. As chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, he's been described as a skilled legislator. As loyal a Republican as ever, he now speaks less harshly than before, but with great independence. Independence from the White House, particularly the White House staff.
Particularly when you don't really know what the other view is, when you're never really part of the process. I mean, if you were part of the process and the consensus was built in discussions with Treasury and White House staff, then you'd be more obliged to follow the consensus. But we're never part of the consensus. We're notified, we're not consulted.
What are you running for, Bob?
Whatever's open.
Nowhere has Bob Dole's independence from the White House been more visible than on the subject of the deficit. This past year, the administration was trying to emphasize the recovery and played down the deficit. Bob Dole was talking deficit everywhere he went. It was a kind of crusade.
I think the biggest problem we have this coming year in Congress is the federal deficit. It's going to be a growing campaign issue. And somehow we've got to get the message out. What happens if we don't deal with the deficit?
They cannot be pleased in this election year to hear you talk about raising taxes, to hear you haranguing even about the deficit.
Well, I'm not certain, maybe not pleased, but I would hope understanding in the fact that the Senate is a separate institution. We're not hostile, but neither are we patsies for somebody's point of view.
How serious, though, do you think the deficit is in the future of this country, say over the next 4 or 5 years?
Well, I think it's probably the greatest problem we face on the domestic scene are the massive deficits, and I don't believe that President Reagan disagrees with that. I think what we have is an election year with the advice to the president being, well, let's not do anything this year. Let's appoint a commission and let the commission report to us at the end of the year. My view is we have a commission. It's called the Congress. We got elected to solve problems. But I assume that we'll we'll muddle through 1984 and let the deficit mount. And then if people lose their jobs in 85 or interest rates go up, then we'll say, well, maybe we should have done something in 84.
The story will continue after this.
We must bring federal deficits down.
When the president finally addressed himself to the deficit in his State of the Union speech, Dole felt his message had gotten through and thought something might even be done about it. Whether anything happens before the election is another matter.
Have you had to defend him in the White House when he's publicly opposed the president's policy, White House policy?
No. Actually, early in my days as an assistant to the president at the White House, I told the person who was responsible for congressional liaison, I said, he's your responsibility, not mine. That's your territory. I have my hands full dealing with the private sector.
As Secretary of Transportation, Elizabeth Dole is responsible in part for auto safety. As a true believer in that, she could be in direct conflict with the White House, where the attitude has been somewhat laissez-faire as far as forcing the automakers to install safety devices.
What happens when Secretary Dole goes to the White House and says, look, here are the facts, plain and simple. These are extraordinary devices that are going to save lives. And the White House, in its own wisdom, says no.
Well, see, I'm not
What do you
willing
do?
to concede that. That's hypothetical.
No, that's right.
I think I've been a pretty good advocate, Morley. I've been able to carry my point of view in a number of instances since I arrived here as Secretary of Transportation. And if I have the facts and the case and the record reflects that indeed airbags or mandatory safety belts, detachable or non-detachable or whatever other option is the one that we should proceed forward with and talk with the White House about, then, you know, as I say, I'm convinced with that record that I can make my case. But we don't have the record completely analyzed yet, so we're really getting ahead. Now, let me just mention...
You're that sure of yourself that
Yes.
you're satisfied?
I have a record here of having carried a number of issues to Cabinet Council, to the Cabinet meetings, to the President, and I've been able to carry my case.
If necessary, she'll publicly disagree with her husband. Once, when she was a federal trade commissioner, even debated him over the issue of a consumer protection agency.
I do feel quietly confident about this debate today, or this discussion, because, you know, the last person that Bob Dole debated was Fritz Mondale. And look what happened to Fritz.
Thank you, Mrs. Mondale. Now, be very honest, I looked at Elizabeth's speech just one time. I have a weak stomach. And I didn't give her mine until after hers had gone to press.
Do you have to keep secrets from each other?
There are times when we're working on something within the administration. It's not ready to be talked about outside of the White House, and so I may feel that it's not appropriate to talk with him.
What would happen if one of you knew of something that you were sworn to secrecy about that could harm the other? What would you do?
That'd be a tough question. I can't
think
try to think of something
what
that
it would
might
be
happen,
exactly.
I assume that if she had the information, she would tell me, and then if I had it, I'd keep it quiet.
They work quite hard at their jobs, and if there is such a thing as modesty among highly visible Washington couples, the Doles do have at least a streak of it.
I think in a lot of ways we are typical of couples all across America today. More and more you have the two-career family, and I doubt that our schedules are that much more demanding than a lot of people's across this country. This is a phenomenon of our particular generation.
But I think the last thing you want to do is to go around trying to impress people how hard we're working. And I think that could be, it's like showing pictures of your grandchildren, I guess, in a sense.
I'll tell you how hard you're working. I borrowed your phone a minute ago in the kitchen, and there are 3 cookbooks. Cooking for 2, making it in less than an hour,
right.
and keep it simple.
Well, that sums it up. It really does. He doesn't get any gourmet meals these days.
But even those books aren't used. Those are too complicated. We have these little things in sacks that you drop in boiling water for 20 minutes.
Right.
The Doles made quite a political 1-2 punch, and indeed both are mentioned as possible candidates for president or vice president in 1988, which of course creates some interesting possibilities.
We may be looking at a woman on the ticket, and I may be looking at her more than anybody else.
You really think so?
Well, I think it's a possibility, certainly, as you look at, it's going to happen, in my view, this century sometime. There's going to be a woman on the ticket, should be and will be. We've kidded about a Dole ticket, but she said she wasn't certain she wanted to be on the ticket. So, so we've had a lot of fun with it.
Bob says we'd save some money that way. You
Yeah,
could
we
close down one of the houses.
But if there was a Dole ticket, who would be president?
Well, that's what she hasn't told me.